So now we want to talk about some of the characters in Thick Black Theory, and those are all mostly the heroes of the Three Kingdoms. If you haven't read Romance of the Three Kingdoms, I'd highly recommend you do that. Very interesting. But we're going to talk about some of the major players during the Three Kingdoms period. You had three different major kingdoms within China that were all vying for power, but none of them could really defeat each other, and there was a very specific reason why that's explained in Thick Black Theory. But we'll go ahead and talk about some of the major players during the Three Kingdoms period. First, we're going to talk about Cao Cao. Then we're going to talk about Liu Bei. Then we'll talk about Sun Quan, Sima Yi, and Zhuge Liang. So let's start out with Sun Quan. Li Zongwu said Cao Cao was all black heart. His heart was completely black. He killed Lu Boshi. He killed Kong Rong. He killed Yang Shu. He killed Dong Qingfuan. He killed the queen and the prince. Cao Cao just dared to do anything. He was so black. He even said, "I'd rather betray everyone in the world than have others betray me." And his heart was so black that nobody could ever reach it. Therefore, he became a top hero at the time. Cao Cao was the blackest, had the blackest heart. Next, we're going to talk about Liu Bei. In Liu Bei's case, it was all thick face. Liu Bei was the most thick-faced person at the time. He depended on Cao Cao. He depended on Lu Bu. Depended on Liu Biao. Depended on Sun Quan. Depended on Yuan Shao. He went so many places. He lived in other people's houses, and he felt no shame. Another very interesting thing about, a very funny thing to me about Liu Bei, is he loved crying all throughout his life. He cried to everybody when he met problems he couldn't solve, just constantly crying. And ultimately, his failure as a man, this crying all the time, became an accomplishment in its own right. People eventually said, Liu Bei cried up his kingdom. So, amazing story. Cao Cao was the blackest, had the blackest heart. Liu Bei was the thickest, had the thickest face, always crying, had no shame whatsoever. Li Zongwu tells us that Cao Cao and Liu Bei were the top of thick and black. One had the blackest heart, one had the thickest face. There's a story in the Romance of the Three Kingdoms that tells us that one day Cao Cao and Liu Bei, both rulers of their respective states, were boiling wine together and talking about heroism and heroes. And Cao Cao said to Liu Bei, "There are only two heroes in the world, me and you." So these guys were really at the top of thick and black. Cao Cao had the blackest heart. Liu Bei had the thickest face. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about Sun Quan. He was a confederate and a relative of Liu Bei, so some family member of sorts of Liu Bei. His heart was almost as black as Cao Cao's. However, he was not as black as Cao Cao and not as thick as Liu Bei. But he had both qualities. He was both thick and black. He wasn't as black as Cao Cao, he wasn't as thick as Liu Bei, but he had both qualities in abundance. And therefore, Sun Quan also became a top hero. Next person we'll tell you about is Sima Yi. After Cao Cao, Liu Bei, and Sun Quan died, he seized the opportunity and really rose up and rose to power. He learned from Cao Cao, learned from Liu Bei, and others. He became the most thick and black person. It was said that he could tease widows and orphans, and he could take a woman's insult. Because of this, because he became the most thick and black person, the country became Sima's. And finally, we'll talk about Zhuge Liang. Zhuge Liang was the best general in the country, best military man, best general in the country. He tried to defeat Sima, but couldn't, because Sima was the thickest and the blackest person, and in the end, Zhuge Liang died vomiting blood. So even though Zhuge Liang was the best general, probably had the best strategies, was the greatest military genius of the time, he couldn't defeat Sima, and he ended up dying vomiting blood because Sima was so black and so thick.